never rests.
Counting careless in the sky. What a thrilling time to be alive.
What is up, everybody? It is Thursday morning, 8:33 a.m., and it's time for the Georgia Show. I'm Jake Rowe, senior editor at DawgsHQ. It's Palmer Toms, our team beat writer at DawgsHQ, and we've got a few things to cover today. Georgia does not have a big national signing day. That was yesterday, first Wednesday in February. Long live the first weekend and first Wednesday in February. It is the old national signing day, but it is definitely old at this point because nothing happened really for Georgia except for the addition of an intriguing walk-on, and we're going to get into that, and we're going to talk about why it's intriguing if you haven't been following along. We're going to talk about dogs in the NFL draft. Todd McShay, no longer at ESPN, but still a very involved draft analyst, has something to say about a fan favorite Bulldog, and then we'll continue our look ahead, a quick look ahead at Georgia's 2024 schedule with Auburn. Palmer, real quick, before we get into anything else, tell us what's going on with Georgia basketball right now, because nothing good.
Yeah, 4 straight losses. A late tip last night, so gotta have the coffee ready for this one. They come out on the losing end of the Battle of Bulldogs at Mississippi State, and just couldn't quite get things going offensively. That's kind of been a struggle for this team, especially in the second halves of games. So, I think I understand, we've got a lot of people wanting to talk basketball on our message board, and, I'm always more than happy to do it. I'm certainly welcoming that as somebody that has covered this team over the last, 5-6 seasons now. But, I would say, that there is probably a little bit too short of a leash with Mike White. People are very frustrated with him at this point. And, I think that maybe some of it has to do more with the players and honestly, the strength of the SEC, because Georgia is, competitive in all these games, and, teams, previous regimes probably wouldn't have been competitive. And, maybe the teams of previous regimes would have been, winning a lot of these games because the strength of the league wasn't, quite what it is now. There's, 9 projected teams in the NCAA tournament. Georgia looking like it might be on the right side of the NIT bubble right now. So we'll see. Georgia hasn't played postseason basketball since 2017. And so I think making the NIT would certainly be a welcomed improvement.
Yeah, and you hit on something key there. And listen, when I say what I'm going to say, we're going to be done with Georgia basketball real fast. But man, Mark Fox made a couple tourneys, wouldn't have made a tournament in today's SEC. Just wouldn't have done it. I'm sorry, it just wouldn't have been there. Listen, this team is better year to year. We'll see if they can come out of this swoon, because the swoon last year was at the end of the SEC schedule. They lost 6 straight games. Right now they're on a 4-game losing streak.
4 games. Yep.
Yeah. They need to kind of come out of this and maybe try to climb back a little closer to 500 in SEC play before the season ends, to really feel good about maybe where the direction is headed. But, Asa Newell, elite talent on the way. There's not an elite talent. There's not an NBA talent on this roster right now. It doesn't feel like. Maybe you get an Asa Newell in there and maybe get a guy that you can kind of, lean on as a closer, maybe, or even if he's not a closer, maybe he takes some attention away from some guys that have closing ability but can't really do it when they become the focal point of where things are. But it lost to Mississippi State last night. They've let a couple of games, very gettable games, get away from them at home. Those really sting right now, and there's no doubt about it. Palmer, Georgia adds a preferred walk-on on National Signing Day, but not your everyday walk-on. Jeremy Bell from Clinch County. Obviously you kind of dug into this one a little bit, writing a commitment story there. What did you learn about Jeremy Bell?
That he's an incredible athlete. I mean, just, watched his highlights, looked at the stats, and, it, like you said, it's not your traditional preferred walk-on. This is a kid was committed to Indiana, had an offer from Vanderbilt. So he's turning down Power 5 opportunities, if Power 5 is even what we want to call it anymore. but he's turning down those power conference opportunities to end up at Georgia, not on scholarship right now, but, you pointed out on the board that it wouldn't surprise you if this is a kind of kid that ends up on scholarship at some point. Plays basketball, has some pretty crazy highlights there. Averaged, 15.2 and 16.6 over the last 2 seasons, 2 full seasons there on the hardwood. Big guy, plays, with that size. He's a rebounder in basketball, and he's a jump ball guy in football, can go up and get it. He's also got the speed, won the 400-meter dash for, his classification, and qualified for the 300-meter hurdles and the long jump. So this kid's an athlete. Did a little bit of it all, put up over 1,000 yards this past season, accountable for 20 touchdowns for Clinch County on their way to a quarterfinal exit in the playoffs.
Yeah, Clinch County, I'm very familiar with the program because it was our arch rival in high school down at Atkinson County. I mean, there was a good rivalry there. And so I've gotten to know a lot of people from down there over the years, and was speaking to a guy that just recently stopped doing the radio broadcast for Clinch County. And, he got together with some guys down there and told me, he said, man, listen, we have seen very few athletes playing for or playing against Clinch County come through here of Jeremy Bell's ilk. I mean, he is the only guy that they could clearly come up with that was just absolutely better that they had seen in person on the field with Clinch County football was Champ Bailey. That was the only guy they could come up with.
Pretty good player.
Pretty good player. And he was obviously clearly better. Okay. But, you're talking about, Jonathan Smith, who played for Georgia Tech and played in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills, I believe it was a punt returner. You're talking about Matthew Thomas, who played at Atkinson County with me and was a really good wide receiver at South Carolina. You're talking about some really, really good players. And, the book on Jeremy Bell is that at, probably around 6'1", you think jump ball receiver and you think, 6'4", 6'5", maybe 6'3". Now he's about 6'1". You can see elbow above the rim type stuff on his basketball highlights. You can see a lot of make you miss and some just raw speed in his football highlights, high points to football real well, a real physical player. Something we need to think about here. And while it wasn't announced, right, while it didn't just come out there, we know that Ladin Makoni came to Georgia as a preferred walk-on. That Ladin Makoni came in. He spent 1 year's preferred walk-on. They love what they saw, and they put him on scholarship the next year. He took that opportunity. Will not shock me. I'm not saying that I would probably be a little surprised if he had a Georgia career like Ladin Makoni did. Okay. But would not surprise me if the same scholarship pattern holds up where, by year 2, he's maybe on scholarship because he is an elite athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, did Georgia announce Ladin Makoni on signing day?
I believe they did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. And you can announce preferred walk-ons. I mean, they can sign and everything like that. I believe Ladin Makoni was, part of the class. But at this point, I mean, we knew it. We pretty much knew it at the time.
Right.
We knew it at the time, and you don't want to put that out because if they're not going to put it out, then that's their business, and you don't want it to seem like, okay, well, they brought this kid in as a walk-on, and if they don't want it out there, then it's not going to be out there. But we've learned since things players have said, things coaches have said about earning that spot, and that's what Lad did. And again, I wouldn't dream of saying this is the next Ladin Makoni. I'm not like that. I'm not like a hot take guy or trying to, excite people about this kid. But what I am saying is, you talk about having a Vanderbilt offer. You think if Georgia had it to go over again, that London Humphreys wouldn't been in a Georgia uniform right away. He didn't have very many offers either. And, Georgia went after him hot and heavy as soon as he entered the transfer portal. Jeremy Bell is a big-time player, man. He's a big-time player. And listen, you don't even get a preferred walk-on opportunity at a place like Georgia if you're not a really, really good football player. It's a little tougher as a skill athlete because we've seen Georgia over the years go out and recruit those 6'3 plus 280, 90 pound plus guys to come in as walk-on offensive linemen. We've seen them fill a lot of those spots with guys like that. But for them to go out and take a skill guy, and it's not unheard of. Jalen Johnson played some major snaps for Georgia.
Mekhi
Muse. Yeah, that's another one. I mean, Georgia has had some dudes kind of step in. And
I feel like, and you mentioned that, Georgia has gone out and gotten those linemen. I feel like, and probably has something to do with, the size and strength of the caliber, scholarship guys that they're bringing in. I feel like the preferred walk-ons at skill positions have had a bigger impact than
no doubt about it.
Any of the linemen, because they're able to go out and get bigger, stronger, faster guys to play in the trenches. But, if you're a good, receiver and you can go up and get the ball and you run great routes, or, you know what you're doing in the backfield, you can earn a role.
Yeah, those skill guys, you're right.
Especially special teams.
Exactly. Those skill guys, it goes back to kind of, I know Dion is kind of persona non grata in college football now for all the noise that Colorado made last year. But, he had a point, and Shedeur Sanders had a point too when they talked about, hey, listen, a lot of these skill guys can the skill guys from HBCUs and group of 5 schools and even FCS schools, they can hang at a Power 5 level. Hell, we've seen it. Like, we've seen Georgia share the field with guys like Andy Isabella and the kid that went to North Carolina, the Walker kid, Tez Walker.
Yep.
Quintez Cephas is another one. Who is that his name? Montez Cephas. That's right. There was another Cephas out there at some point that got into some trouble. I think he went to Wisconsin. But we've seen those guys, kind of match up and then make the jump. Juice Wells started his career that way. So a lot of these skill players do it. Georgia stocks up on the linemen because Kirby's always had that philosophy. Hey, there's only like a 1% of the population that's 6'3" or taller. So we're going to go out and get big men and see how they develop. And none of those guys have really developed into, consistent contributors at Georgia. It's very, very tough, especially when you recruit the trenches the way that Georgia does. But, listen, I don't know what position Jeremy Bell's going to play. I assume wide receiver, because that seems to be where Georgia needs the most. They signed 5 5-star prospects per the On 300 this year. 3 of them are defensive backs. So that's what makes me think that Bell will probably end up as a wideout at the next level. But yeah, I tend to think that this is a very, very good get for Georgia. Power 5 offers, watching, him just eyeball test in general. I remember folks from Atkinson County telling me early last year that, hey, if you haven't seen the kid from Clinch County play, you need to check him out. And I remember reaching out to some folks down in Clinch, asking about him, and they got back to me right away. And they're like, man, listen, he's raw. I don't know what's going to happen as far as how good he's going to be. They started throwing the ball a little bit this year. He was doing really well. Then I think they had some issues at quarterback where one of their guys, maybe they lost a quarterback. I'm not sure if it was injury or some off-field stuff. They had to kind of go back to a single wing. And then when they did that, he kind of became a ball carrier for them. And you see that on film too, him do some pretty special stuff. But not trying to gas this up as the next big addition or an answer to any sort of issues that Georgia might have in recruiting receivers. But I am not going to be at all surprised if this guy is making plays for Georgia at wideout. We've seen it before, and I tend to think this kid is as talented as anybody that they've signed as a preferred walk-on at those skill positions since Kirby Smart has been at Georgia. All right, Palmer, let's look at the NFL draft. And Todd McShay came out on Ryan Russillo podcast on Monday talking about the Senior Bowl. And he said that Ladin Makoni's skill set as receiver, route running, acceleration, speed, ball skills, second to none. Says he sees him as a plug-and-play player. Now, I've made my thoughts known on this. I've never once doubted Lad's ability. I'm worried about the medicals and how teams are going to treat that. But he sees Lad as maybe a potential late first round, early second round pick. None of us doubt Lad, the player. What are you thinking as far as your thoughts on Lad at the Senior Bowl and how much that helped him?
Yeah, it definitely helped. I mean, because you look around at all these mock drafts right now, and that is a name that is popping up in that 33, 34, 35 slots of these 2-round projections. And that didn't seem to be where he was popping up. There was some talk before the Senior Bowl. Field Yates put out there, said, hey, I think that we're going to look at Ladin Makoni after this week, and there's going to be some first round buzz around him. And, I looked at that and, kind of like what you said coming into this, segment, is that none of us have ever doubted Lad, the player. We've all seen what he can do between the lines, but he's got to be out there. And the injuries, his size is probably, a little bit of a concern. Very interested to see what he does, how he does at the combine, because I think that is going to be a big, big, big part of this process for Lad. Those medicals absolutely are going to be a part of that. And that may not be something that we hear about until draft night. I mean, that was the case with Nakobe Dean. He starts
Nakobe
slipping.
Dean, Darnell Washington, Keely Ringo. I mean, all over
Keely,
the place. Yep. It seems like we learned that at a very late stage in the game. Sometimes it starts to trickle out.
We learn it when it's convenient. I mean, right. If a kid slips, oh, well, hey, look, they have medical issues. But if a kid goes early, we'll look at what he did on the field, and teams see that and they watch the tape. So
it's almost like we hear it on draft night because everybody feels it. Everybody has. It's clear when a guy starts sliding that something's going on, and it's almost like when everybody else knows, when everybody knows that everybody else knows, then they'll start letting it leak. But yeah, that seems to be kind of the way it goes. And listen, I've got my fingers crossed. I'm rooting for the guy. He was a blast to cover. It wasn't all that interesting as far as speaking to us in the media, but he was always kind of humble and had a good spirit about him when
incredibly polite.
Yeah.
I mean, if he can be on the
guy, good off the field guy, did a lot of great things in the community, was a good works All-American, Danny Warfel guy. So, I mean,
Campbell Award. I mean, a good student, that is somebody that I think that if he can stay on the field, he's going to have a really good NFL career, because he's quick, he's shifty, he's, everything that you want in a wide receiver. He's just not 6'2".
Yeah. And he's 187 pounds. And, what's going to happen at the NFL Combine, I think, if I had to predict, I say he's going to go jump well. He's going to go run well. He's going to probably be a little stronger than folks think he is. I'm just worried when they start, tweaking ankles and tweaking knees and stuff like that, doing MRIs during the pre-draft process. I just hope all the cartilage is where it's supposed to be. And because if there's something degenerative, somebody's going to knock the hell out of them. I mean, that's just the way it's going to happen. And, it happens to a lot of guys. It doesn't happen to some, like it didn't happen to Sony Michel. Sony Michel had some degenerative issues in his knee, and the Patriots took him. Now we can talk about the Patriots questions and whatever, but they took him. He helped them win the Super Bowl. So sometimes, when you're at certain positions, they'll say, all right, we're going to get the best 4 or 5 years out of you as a rookie. Yeah. And then, then we're going to cut you loose and you can fend for yourself. But let's move on to Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Catches a touchdown in that game. And again, another guy that was great to us, made a lot of good plays for Georgia. I think he's a really good player. Do you think Georgia fans might be getting a little too gassed up about Mark? Because you look on Twitter and stuff, and they're like, better career, going to have a better NFL career than he did at Georgia. Some folks thinking maybe a number 2 wide receiver. Man, it is so hard to be a number 2 wide out in the NFL, and it's tough to see.
I don't think that it's unrealistic that Marcus has a better career in the NFL than he did at Georgia, and you look at all the guys that were around him at Georgia, and, Ladd being one of those, and Brock Bowers being one of those. Like, I don't know where you take targets from to get the ball in the hands of Marcus Moore. Obviously had earned a role and was out there and playing as a true freshman, was a, highly touted prospect coming out of high school, and earned a spot on the field, gets hurt. And that was, a tough recovery for him. Then that second year, I think that he was still, whether he will admit it or not, I think he was still getting comfortable.
No doubt.
And obviously, he was on the field. I mean, you go back and you watch that national championship game and the Bowers touchdown, the final, score, the one that put Georgia up 8 points there. Marcus had a huge block. And so, he was on the field a lot and a major contributor for that first national championship team. Grew into a pass catcher more. I think that that's a credit. You can probably credit Brian McClendon some with that, and his development. I think that he's got a lot of great traits. Like what I said with Laddie. Lad is not 6'1". Lad is, not 200 something pounds. Marcus is those things. And so, you look at Marcus and he's got everything that teams want in an NFL receiver. I probably agree with you. He's probably not a wide receiver one. There's only 32 of those out there. And, that's an incredibly hard tier to be in, but I think that he can have a really good NFL career. And, it would not shock me one bit if he had a better NFL career than he did a UGA career.
I would be a little surprised, not because I don't believe in him. I think he's going to stick around and play a lot in the NFL, but maybe a Josh Reynolds type guy that, played, believe he played in Los Angeles for a bit and then ended up at with Detroit, had a couple drops this year in the playoffs. I'm not going to see a lot of that from Marcus Rosemy-Jackson.
But if he has a Josh Reynolds type career, is that not better than the
Well, I don't know. I don't really know Josh Reynolds' numbers. I'm talking about just from a numbers perspective.
Yeah.
If you're a 3 or a 4 or a 5 receiver in the NFL, there aren't going to be a whole lot of targets for you there either.
I want to say Josh Reynolds was the leading receiver for the Rams one of those years because he ended up with the Titans after that. He really replaced. I was looking into this recently while watching those Lions games. I want to say it was the year that Cooper Kupp was out for the year, and obviously that's the Rams receiver one, and then Reynolds kind of got boosted up a notch in the depth chart. So to me, I mean, I think a Josh Reynolds career,
yeah, that would be a big time success. That would be a huge success. Now he does have a couple of 600-yard receiving seasons. This past year was one of them. I mean, it would be a phenomenal success. Don't get me wrong. Like I do think he has a chance to be a successful pro. I just don't know that 600 yards in 16 games is better than kind of what he did at Georgia. But listen, it's not going to shock me if he sticks around. That's for sure. I mean, because he does block. I believe he'll go in and he'll play special teams. He's going to do what's asked of him, and he's a fantastic player, fantastic kid, despite the speeding issues. I had those myself. I mean, we all have them. He's a good player, and I think that folks might be a little too jacked up maybe about him right now. But I do think he has a chance to go have a pretty long, successful NFL career. Chris Conley, playing in the Super Bowl, has had a very good NFL career. Had a very good college career. Led Georgia in receiving twice. Was one of the last guys to do that. I mean, one of the last 2 or 3 guys to lead Georgia in receiving 2 times in consecutive years. Brock Bowers, I think, is the most recent.
Did it 3 years, 3 straight.
Yeah. So. But yeah, I mean, I definitely believe in him as a player. He made some big catches for Georgia too. I mean, you look at I believe there was a nice catch against Georgia Tech in 2022, right there at the goal line. The catch in the back of the end zone against Tennessee was another good one to getting Georgia off to a good start against Kentucky this past year. Had a really nice game at Tennessee this past year. Was really a little bit of a vol killer if you want to think about it in his career.
Yeah, and one thing that I would say with Marcus, and I think he had some pretty big catches in that 21 game up there as well. I could be wrong there, but I think one thing about Marcus is that a lot of those catches that he made are not going to be highlight reel catches, but they were important, move the chains, type plays that kept Georgia drives alive. And Really good in that, Georgia being the best, third down team in the country. Marcus was really good in that kind of a role, get to the sticks and, run a little curl route and, step out of bounds, make a play on the sidelines type deal. So, hey, Jay, you mentioned Brock Bowers there as, somebody that led Georgia in receiving consecutive seasons. Brock made the rounds at Radio Row yesterday out in Vegas for the Super Bowl. Let it slip that he might want to play for the Titans. I mean, this Nashville kid is pretty excited about that opportunity.
Oh, my God. Here we go. I mean, yeah. I mean, listen, I think you want Brock.
Where do you think Brock Bowers is probably best fit in the NFL?
Give me 32 NFL beat writers, okay, and have them all go ask the question, do you want to play for the team that I cover? And Brock's going to be like, yes, absolutely. I love it.
Well, Brock,
I love the idea of playing for your team.
That's not how it was. It wasn't, hey, Brock, do you want to play for the Titans? It was, Brock, where do you want to play? I don't know. I think it'd be cool to play for Tennessee Titans or something.
He wants to go eat the banana peel and all, right?
He wants to stay in the South is what he wants to do.
Hey, that's pretty crazy coming up from Napa and doing that. I mean, man, I think Brock's going to be really good no matter where he goes. I do wonder a little bit about the fit there in Tennessee because they just had the Titans have had such a tough time getting consistent pass game stuff going. I know they got a new coach and everything.
New head coach. The other one that I've seen a lot, and I haven't seen Brock to the Titans a lot. Obviously, that was just a conversation that came up yesterday. The one that I think I've seen the most is him going at 5 to the Chargers and being the first draft pick of Harbaugh era out in LA.
That would be fun going to play for a really good quarterback like that.
Yeah.
To a guy listen, Will Levis has exceeded my expectations. I was a massive Will Levis hater, still am. You're going to definitely do a victory lap if he crashes and burns.
You hate anything that I like, Jake.
No, that's not true. You didn't like him when he was. I didn't like him at Kentucky. I thought he was so overrated. And he's a gifted kid. I mean, big, strong arm passer. But I mean, Justin Herbert's been really good. And, I think Harbaugh offense would be pretty good for him. But I mean,
who has had success in the NFL with, and obviously a different era of football, but Vernon Davis when he was out there with the 49ers.
Yeah. I think, you looking, I don't know the draft order per se, 24 NFL draft. Great.
And a lot of this obviously has to, do with the quarterbacks and, sure. That's kind of what sets the draft.
Quarterbacks in good teams. I think I would rather see him, obviously those two things coincide more often than not.
Well, I'm saying the quarterbacks and what teams feel like they need a quarterback, what teams are going to jump up and go get a quarterback. That's kind of what determines the draft. Because to me, Brock Bowers, no team I feel like has a need for a tight end, but that's the kind of player that could be the best available, maybe from the first pick on. And it's a matter of, hey, can we afford, in the Titans situation, they need offensive line help. You've got to protect, a potential franchise quarterback there. So do you go with what you need and do you do that? Or do you feel like, hey, we can kick that down the road and, or we don't feel like we have huge needs out there that can be addressed in the first round. Let's just go get a really damn good football player.
Yeah, that's definitely a way to look at it. When you look at kind of the top half of the first round NFL draft, there is really only one quarterback that you feel confident in. That's Justin Herbert. I mean, you got Aaron Rodgers there.
Those two things typically coincide.
They do. But a lot of times you've got a trade of some sort that slipped in there. And, you've got one or two or three teams that have a chance to add, like the Eagles last year, right? You've got a chance normally that there's at least two or three teams up there that maybe don't belong up there because they're set at quarterback. But like the Chargers are at 5, Justin Herbert. You got the Jets at 10 with Aaron Rodgers coming back, but Aaron Rodgers has always kind of been, he's never really been a tight end guy. He's never tight end all the time. You're like, oh man, Aaron Rodgers I remember fantasy football back when I used to play it consistently. Every time he got one, it was like, oh, man, Aaron Rodgers has got a tight end now, and then nothing. Jermichael Finley, I remember, went to Green Bay to die. So, I mean, that was just, you look, I would definitely, for Brock's sake, don't want him to go to the Broncos, not because they're a mess of a franchise or anything, but because they just don't have a quarterback and the way they treated Russell Wilson. You get to 16 at Seattle and Geno Smith, still not in love with that. Get all the way to 17, you got Trevor Lawrence. Would be a nice, would be a nice addition there.
You look at 15
to Cincinnati, maybe one of those two teams, maybe Jacksonville or Cincy could trade up and get him.
Yeah.
I've seen him. Cincy could trade up and get him.
Yeah.
Massive. I mean, you want to talk about set up for the future.
Yeah. I've seen him mocked a couple times at 15 to Indianapolis, and obviously that's a quarterback that the story's still out on, and Anthony Richardson, but obviously there's a lot of excitement there.
If Brock goes to the NFL Combine and runs a 4.46, he ain't going there. Like he's. I don't think he's slipping out of the top 10. Somebody's in love with that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we've got a lot of Falcons fans that watch this show, and a lot of them wouldn't wish him to Atlanta, but if they can figure something out at the quarterback spot, maybe they end up getting Justin Fields, or they end up signing Kirk Cousins or whatever. That could be a good quarterback spot. But I don't know that the Falcons are in need of a tight end because they've got Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the Falcons would draft a tight end this high again for fear of another Kyle Pitts situation.
Wherever Brock goes, I think that team is definitely going to get better because he's just a better football player. Now, Palmer, one thing we've been doing here lately is we've been looking ahead to Georgia's schedule. We did Alabama on Tuesday. Rusty and I did. Let's look to the Deep South's oldest rivalry, Georgia and Auburn. Played in October. Hate it. Nobody likes it. Don't know why it keeps happening. But
hey, at least it's October and not September.
Yeah, not September.
At
least it's in Athens and not Auburn. The crappiest press box in all of college football.
You don't know what our new one's going to look like.
Yeah, we don't have one yet, so we'll see. I tend to think that Claude Felton on his way out said, "Treat my guys right with this new press box." That's what I'm going to choose to believe until
I'm choosing to believe that it's going to be his press box. The Claude.
Yeah. Oh, they're going to name it. They're something about it's going to be named after Claude. But so, all right, if you look back, Palmer, and I did a little digging up here. The last time that Auburn was able to stay within 17 points of Georgia at home in Athens was in 2016. That was when Auburn was number 8 and Georgia was unranked. And Georgia still won 13-7 on a pick six from Maurice Smith. And then so you take that's one. Georgia wins by 27. The time previous to that, Georgia wins by 38. No, I'm sorry. That was I'm screwing that up because they played twice in a row in Auburn. That's a sore subject. They won by 38 still in 2011, Georgia won by 7 in 2009. Georgia won by 25 in 2007. It has been a house of horrors for Auburn in Athens, Georgia, and I think it's going to be the same again this year because I don't know why. I'm sure some Auburn folks could kind of shed some light on this, but Auburn apparently thinks they're good to go at quarterback, and I have a tough time seeing that.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, when you told me that we were doing a little bit of Georgia-Auburn look ahead, that was the first thing that came to my mind was, have they figured out quarterback? Because I think that, and one thing that interests me about Auburn this year is that Hugh Freeze is going to be calling plays, and we saw the way that worked for them against Georgia. That was the first game that he, took those reins again. And, they were able to use, some different things with Peyton Thorne. And very interested to see the kind of development that he makes from year 1 to year 2. If I'm not mistaken, I know this for a fact. Peyton was a spring pickup, and so didn't have spring practice. Jumped right into it in fall camp. You got to wonder what 15 practices without opponent to prepare for. What that could do for him, and obviously they've added some talent in the wide receiver spot, and they feel good about it. I don't feel as good about it as Auburn folks do, But I think that, you've got a chance to see a better Auburn team this year. I just don't know that they're going to be as good as Georgia.
Yeah, especially not in Athens. I mean, it's, like Kirby said ahead of the Alabama game this year, is like, hey, Alabama's a great football team. They've gotten better as the season goes on. They're playing their best ball right now. And don't try to tell me about, them at Auburn last week, as I've been in that stadium before, and it's a tough place to play. Auburn does a really good job, with that home environment. But I look at the overall team and talent level, all the turnover that happened with that coaching staff this offseason. I still think
A lot.
And I don't think that, while I do think they added some really good wideouts in the 2024 class, I don't think they addressed some immediate needs in the portal. I think this is more, and I'll give Hugh Freeze a little bit of credit on this. I might as well give him plenty of credit on it. I think the guy's a douchebag personally. I don't think he's a good person at all. And I think his track record kind of proves that. And I'm sorry, Auburn fans. I think he's a really good football coach, though. I do. And I think Auburn fans it's funny, they would have said that several years ago when he was at Ole Miss. They'd have said the same thing about him.
Some might still say it.
Yeah, some might still say it. But ultimately, I think, he's aiming for a little bit of a long rebuild, a healthy rebuild, as healthy as you can in the transfer portal, and not just trying to create this vicious cycle of transfer after transfer after transfer.
Kind of like what Ole Miss has created there.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's hard to debate what's going on with them because they've been really successful, but you get into the portal heavily, and you can get into a kind of perpetual cycle there. I think Florida's a little bit caught up into that whirlwind right now.
Florida State.
Yeah, right. Again, you keep bringing up teams that are pretty good, though.
But okay, I guess my point there is that you can build it that way, but it's hard. I think I think it's still, the tail is still out on those teams, and whether it was a successful strategy of building a program or building.
Yeah, true. But I think Hugh Freeze is kind of going about it, building from the high school ranks in a healthier way than some teams are doing it. So we'll see how that works out and see how that helps them in Athens, where they've needed a lot of help for a long time. It's been, I believe, their last win in Athens was 2005. So we're coming up on 20 years since Auburn has won a game in Athens. And I know I bring this up to you every year, but when I go to that game in Athens this year, I'll have went to every Georgia-Auburn game in Athens since I believe the last one I missed in Athens was 95. Yeah, you weren't born yet.
This guy was not a thought then.
Yeah, wasn't even
my parents weren't married then, Jake.
Oh my God. Now listen, I was only 12 years old, but still, it's 95 was the last Georgia-Auburn home game that I didn't go to. So I got a little streak going there.
And one thing that I will say about that game is, what's going to be interesting is Georgia's coming off of Alabama the week before. And so, what kind of a game after the game wear down effect is there going to be? Obviously, I think
they've had a bye week 2 weeks before that.
Right. But I think that it helps that they've got that game at home. That they have Auburn at home. I just did a glance over the Auburn schedule. They've got Oklahoma in on the Plains the week before. So, it's not like they've got some.
They play their first 5 games. That'll be their first road game of the season. They play their first 5 at home. Alabama, A&M, Cal, New Mexico, Arkansas.
I want to say Auburn had a situation like that last year where they played like the first half of their season at home as well.
Well, Georgia did.
Georgia did. Yeah.
Auburn was their first away game, but that was after 4 straight games at home, I believe.
Yeah, Auburn opened the season. I'm completely wrong. They did play at Cal too.
Yeah, they did
and
play
College Station the week before. So.
Oh boy, and that Cal game was not ambient in non-pill form. I tried my best to watch it. Fell asleep like 9 times, and just couldn't hang in there.
Yeah, if we think the 9 o'clock tips for Georgia basketball are bad, talk about a 10-15 Auburn football kickoff.
Oh boy, that was rough. That was rough, and I believe that was on the same night that Alabama, Texas played
It
as
was.
well.
Yep.
I was funny enough. I was we're running long here, but funny enough, I was just as interested in Tennessee Austin P as I was Alabama Texas because that was also a tornado of ugly in Knoxville for that one. Kind of let you know what was coming for Tennessee on the offensive side of the ball. But hey. So no bark after. We will be back with you Sunday. Probably during the day because it's Super Bowl Sunday. We're not going to compete with the Super Bowl. But we bark after dark. No bark after dark this Monday. We will not have it there. We'll be off for the rest of February and be back with you in March for bark after dark. And then 2 days next week, Tuesday and Thursday, right back here with the Georgia Show for this one. I'm Jake Rowe. He's Palmer Toms. We're Dogs HQ. Y'all have a great weekend.